There are two kinds of invisible. There is invisible, a man who has removed himself, who has walked away, pulled back, gone quiet on purpose, because the quiet is his and he chose it. And then there is the other kind, the kind that happens to you slowly, without your consent, in a house where you have lived for 31 years, where your name is still on the deed and your coffee mug is still in the second cabinet from the left, and the rose bushes you planted along the side fence in 1995 still bloom every May without being asked to. And yet somehow, somewhere along the way, in the years after you retired and stopped going somewhere every morning and stopped having a desk that other people needed things from, you stopped being consulted about anything that mattered. Not all at once. The way these things always happen, gradually, and then completely. I am Walter Voss. I am 74 years old. I spent 38 years as a certified public accountant in Hartford, Connecticut, and I want you to understand something about what that means. It does not mean I wore a good suit, though I did. It means I spent the better part of 4 decades reading numbers the way other people read faces, looking for what they were trying to hide, looking for the gap between what was recorded and what was true, and finding it every time. In 38 years, the numbers were never wrong. The people were wrong. The numbers only ever told me exactly what they knew. I retired in June of 2019 at 71. Patricia and I had been married for 46 years by then. Our son, Daniel, was 43, living 20 minutes away in Glastonbury in a house that Patricia and I had helped with a down payment 11 years prior, $47,000, which we gave freely and without conditions, because that is what you do for your children when you are able to. Or it is what I believed you did. I believed a great many things in June of 2019 that I had quietly revised by the spring of 2022. Welcome to Quiet House Stories. Get settled, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment, and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, you're going to love it here. The retirement was uneventful at first, in the way that things are uneventful when they are exactly what you expected them to be. I had projects. I had the 1963 Ford Galaxy in the garage that I had been promising myself since 2011 that I would restore when I had the time. And now I had the time. And so most mornings I was out there by 8 o'clock with a cup of coffee and a parts catalog and the specific satisfaction of a man who is finally doing the thing he kept saying he would do. Patricia had her garden. We had dinners on Sundays when Daniel came over. We had Thursday evenings with the Brennans from 3 houses down. Life had a shape to it that suited me. The numbers started being wrong in the spring of 2021. Small amounts at first. $200 transferred on a Tuesday in April. $340 in May. On a date I had not been told about. To an account number I did not recognize when I reviewed the statement on the 3rd of June. When I asked Patricia about it, she said she had moved some money over to help Daniel with a short month. She said it pleasantly, the way she said most things. Patricia had always had the gift of saying difficult things in a pleasant register, which is a skill that served a person very well for a very long time until it suddenly doesn't. I noted the amounts. I noted the dates. I noted the account number, which ended in 4471. It was what I had done for 38 years, and it was, by that point, simply how I was built. There are 2 things I have learned about financial regularities in a long career. The first is that they are almost never isolated. A single unexplained transfer is an anomaly. 2 transfers is a pattern. 3 transfers is a decision. The second thing I have learned is that the person committing the irregularity always believes the other person is not paying attention. That belief, that comfortable, settled certainty that the other person has stopped watching, is almost always the thing that ends them. By September of 2021, the transfers had escalated. $800 in 1 week in late August. $1,200 in October. On November 9th and again on November 23rd, there were ATM withdrawals of $1,500 each from a machine on Burnside Avenue in East Hartford, a neighborhood I had no reason to be in and which Patricia, to my knowledge in 31 years of living in Hartford, had never visited. Both withdrawals occurred at 11:14 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was asleep on both occasions. I know the time because I pulled the account statements and read them under the lamp at my desk on the first Saturday of December, and the time is printed on the statement in a font so small it requires reading glasses, which I was wearing. I did not confront Patricia. I want you to understand why. Because the answer matters. I am not a dramatic man. I do not make speeches. I do not slam doors, and I do not issue ultimatums, and I have never in my life made an accusation I could not support with documentation. I had 38 years of professional experience watching what happened when people confronted financial irregularities without a clean record behind them. What happened was that the other side denied it, reframed it, moved the remaining assets, and hired a better lawyer than you could afford on short notice. I had built an entire career on the understanding that patience is the only currency that matters in a long game. I was not going to abandon that principle in my own house. I kept watching. I kept noting. I opened a fresh green ledger, the same brand I'd used in practice for 30 years, bought in packs of 6 from an office supply store on Asylum Avenue, and I began recording every transfer, every withdrawal, every anomalous entry I could document from the joint account and the household credit card. By February of 2022, the total I had documented was $23,847 in 17 months, in transfers and withdrawals from accounts held jointly in both our names, to an account number ending in 4471 that I had subsequently identified through a routine bank inquiry as belonging to Daniel Voss, our son. I sat with that number for several days before I did anything about it. There was a woman who lived next door to us on Sycamore Lane. Her name was Eleanor Marsh, and she was 81 years old and had lived in that house since 1987, 5 years longer than Patricia and I had lived in ours. Her husband Raymond had died in 2013, 9 years prior, and Eleanor had done what certain women of a certain generation do when they are left alone in a house that is fully paid for and full of habit. She had stayed, she had kept a garden, she had learned to manage everything Raymond had managed, and she had developed the particular alert attention of a person with no one to distract her from what was directly in front of her. Eleanor had a kitchen window that looked out onto our shared driveway. She had a habit of sitting with her tea at the kitchen table every morning between 7:30 and 9 o'clock, which she had told me once was a habit she had developed with Raymond and had seen no reason to abandon. The tea was chamomile, steeped exactly 4 minutes, not 3 and not 5, in a blue ceramic pot that had been a wedding gift in 1963. Eleanor had been paying attention. Over the 11 months between April 2021 and March 2022, Eleanor had seen Daniel's car, a dark green Subaru Outback, which she described as being newer than she would have expected from someone Daniel's age, a detail I found both accurate and quietly devastating. In our driveway on 17 mornings when my truck was not there, meaning I was not home, she had seen Patricia leave with Daniel on 3 occasions in the evening, returning after dark. She had seen, on the afternoon of Friday, March 4th, 2022, a man she did not recognize, not Daniel, someone younger, someone she had not seen before, carry 2 flat cardboard boxes from our garage into the back of Daniel's Subaru while Patricia stood on the porch watching. Eleanor had noted the license plate of the unknown man's car on the back of a phone bill envelope, which she had stapled to that day's entry in her notes. I did not know any of this until the evening of Wednesday, March 9th, 2022, when Eleanor knocked on my back door at 7:47 p.m. She was wearing her blue wool coat and carrying a manila envelope, and she said, "Walter, I've been going back and forth about this for a long time, and I have decided you need to have these." She handed me the envelope and went home. She did not stay for tea. She did not offer an explanation or an apology or a commentary on what the envelope contained. She just handed it to me and walked back across the driveway in her blue coat, and I watched her go, and then I closed the back door. Inside the envelope was 11 months of notes on yellow legal paper, written in Eleanor's careful, unhurried cursive, dated and signed at the bottom of each page. 31 pages in total. She had paper-clipped the phone bill envelope with the license plate number to page 14, which was the entry from March 4th. I sat down at the kitchen table, and I read every page. I want you to take a moment with that. 11 months. Eleanor Marsh had been sitting at her kitchen table with her 4-minute chamomile tea, watching our house, and writing down what she saw for 11 months. She had not said anything to me because she had not been certain enough. When she became certain, when she saw the boxes going into Daniel's car with a stranger she had thought to record the plates of, she stopped deliberating and started being an 81-year-old woman with a signed and dated legal record, and she walked across the driveway in her blue wool coat, and she handed it to the person who needed it. There are people in this world who show up. Eleanor Marsh was one of them. The kitchen was quiet. Patricia was asleep upstairs. The copper kettle on the stove caught the light from the overhead lamp and threw a pale oval reflection onto the ceiling. I sat at the table with Eleanor's yellow pages and my green ledger side by side, and I did not move for close to an hour. The refrigerator hummed its low, indifferent hum. The clock above the stove read 8:31 when I looked up at it. Somewhere down Sycamore Lane a dog barked twice, thought better of it, and went quiet. There are things a man learns to sit with when he has been sitting with things long enough. The hour was not an hour of suffering. Exactly. It was an hour of completion. The feeling of the last column of a ledger being filled in, of the numbers finally adding up to the number you had suspected they would. I picked up my coffee mug, white, chipped at the handle from the summer we spent in Cape Cod in 2009, a trip I remembered as one of the better ones, and I held it for a moment without drinking from it. Then I set it down, opened the left drawer of my desk, placed Eleanor's 31 yellow pages inside next to my green ledger, and closed the drawer. Then I went to bed. I slept without difficulty. The following morning, Thursday, March 10th, I called Gary Elgin at 8:15 a.m. Gary was not an attorney. He was a retired insurance fraud investigator, 69 years old, whom I had worked with on 7 professional engagements over the course of my career, the most recent being a corporate account review in 2017. Gary Elgin was meticulous, deeply unimpressed by anyone, and had a manner that I can only describe as ruthlessly accurate. When I told him what I had, the green ledger, Eleanor's pages, the account number, the 17-month timeline, he was quiet for approximately 4 seconds. Then he said, "That's enough to file." I asked him what the appropriate channel was. He said Adult Protective Services handled financial exploitation of older adults. He said I qualified at 74 under Connecticut statute, whether I liked the terminology or not. I told him I did not particularly like it. He said the question of whether I liked it was not relevant to whether it was accurate. I conceded the point. He said he had a contact at the Hartford Regional APS office and that he would make the preliminary call himself if I wanted. I told him that would be appropriate. Gary arrived at my kitchen table at 2:03 p.m. on Friday, March 11th, and spent 1 hour and 47 minutes reviewing the ledger and Eleanor's notes side by side, cross-referencing the transfer dates against the driveway observation dates, checking the account number documentation against the bank inquiry letter I had received. When he finished, he said, "Walter, in terms of documentation quality, this is one of the cleaner cases I've looked at outside of a courtroom." He said he would make the call to APS on Monday. He said I should expect to hear something within 2 weeks. Then he packed up his briefcase, and I walked him to the door, and we shook hands, and I thanked him, and he said not to mention it. And I said I wouldn't, and that was that. I want you to understand what the next 12 days look like, because from the outside, they look like nothing at all. Patricia came home Friday evening, and we had dinner. She asked how my day had been. I said I had Gary over, which was true. She said it was good. I was keeping up with old colleagues. On Sunday, Daniel came for dinner. We had pot roast and cornbread. The Sunday meal we had kept for 26 years. Patricia's mother's recipe, the one her mother had written out by hand on a recipe card in 1996, the winter before she died. The card still tucked in the same cookbook on the 3rd shelf. Daniel ate 2 full plates. He talked about work. He talked about a problem with the gutters on his house in Glastonbury and asked if I knew a good contractor. I told him I'd ask around. I passed him the cornbread and told him it was good to see him, and I meant it because the 2 things, loving your son and documenting what your son has taken from you, are not contradictions. They coexist. I had enough room in me for both. Some men confuse patience with forgetting. I never have. Patience is not forgetting. Patience is knowing exactly what you know and choosing very carefully the right moment to act on it. On the morning of Wednesday, March 23rd, I woke at 6:15 a.m. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table in the early light and I waited. Patricia came downstairs at 7:40. She poured herself a cup and stood at the counter by the window. The dogwood in the front yard was beginning to show the first pale suggestions of blooming, which happened late that year because of the cold March we'd had. I told her I had been reviewing the joint account statements. She said I was always reviewing something. I said I had found discrepancies I could not account for. She set down her cup. "Walter," she said, "you are imagining things." I told her I had documentation. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "You can't prove a single thing." She said it evenly, without heat, without any particular rise in her voice, the way she said most things that she believed fully. Then she said it again. "You can't prove a single thing." I said, "Okay." At 9:03 a.m., there was a knock at the front door. Her name was Sandra Okafor. She was a senior caseworker with the Hartford Regional Adult Protective Services office. She had driven from the Farmington Avenue office and parked in front of our house in a gray sedan at 8:59 a.m., which I observed from the kitchen window. She was 47 years old, professionally composed, and carried a brown leather briefcase of the kind that does not announce itself. Patricia answered the door. I remained seated at the kitchen table with my coffee. Sandra Okafor introduced herself, stated her office and role, and asked if she could come in. Patricia let her in. They came through to the kitchen. Sandra sat across from me, set the briefcase on the table, and opened it with the particular unhurried care of someone who has never needed to rush. She removed a beige folder, approximately an inch thick, and placed it in front of her without opening it yet. She explained that the Hartford APS office had received a referral 12 days prior and had conducted a preliminary review of account records, bank documentation, and witness statements provided by the referring party. She said the review had identified a pattern of transfers totaling $23,847 from a joint account held in the names of Walter and Patricia Voss to an external account over a period of 17 months. She said the pattern was consistent with financial exploitation of a qualifying older adult household member under Connecticut General Statute Section 17B 450. She did not raise her voice. She had the manner of a person who has delivered this particular category of information many times, to many different rooms, and has long since stopped adjusting her delivery based on the temperature of the room. Patricia said, "This is completely out of..." Sandra Okafor said, "Mrs. Voss, I need to ask your husband a few questions first, and then I will have some for you." She said it without sharpness. It was simply the sequence of things. Patricia sat down. I want to tell you something about the expression on Patricia's face in that moment. Not to be unkind. I am telling you this because it is true, and because the story would be dishonest without it. Patricia looked at me the way a person looks at someone when they realize, for the first time in a very long time, that they do not fully know what that person has been doing. It was not anger. It was not guilt. Exactly. It was something closer to recalibration. The quiet, rapid revision of an assumption she had been operating on, apparently, for some time. I looked back at her. I did not say anything. I did not need to. Sandra Okafor asked me 12 questions over the following 43 minutes, working through the account documentation methodically, in chronological order, with reference to specific dates and specific amounts. I answered all 12 fully and accurately. I am a retired CPA with 38 years of practice, and the documentation I had assembled was cleaner than most things I had submitted to clients in my professional life. There was nothing in her questions that I had not already anticipated. She then asked Patricia 4 questions. Patricia's answered question 2, whether she had informed her husband of the transfers at the time they were made, and her answer question 3, whether the funds had been transferred with his knowledge and consent, were, as Gary Elgin later described me over the phone that evening, not helpful to her position. What Gary meant, in his particular language, was that they were honest answers, and that honest answers, in that room on that morning, did not serve Patricia well. At 10:51 a.m., Sandra Okafor closed the folder, returned it to her briefcase, and informed us that the case file would be submitted to the Hartford APS supervisor for determination of formal action, and that we could expect written correspondence within 14 business days. She gave me her card, beige, Hartford City seal in the upper left corner, and shook my hand. She shook Patricia's hand as well. Then she let herself out to the front door and we heard her gray sedan start up on Sycamore Lane. And then we heard it leave. Patricia and I sat at the kitchen table for 4 minutes without speaking. Then Patricia said, "How long have you known?" I told her I had been a CPA for 38 years. I told her that in 38 years the numbers had never lied to me, not once, and that the numbers in our joint account had told me exactly what they knew beginning in the spring of 2021. I told her I had loved her for 46 years, and that the two facts, the 38 years of reading numbers and the 46 years of loving her, had not been in conflict until someone decided that I was no longer paying attention. She said, "I didn't think you were watching." I said, "I know. I need to tell you something about Patricia, because this story would be incomplete without it. And incomplete is a form of dishonest, and I did not spend 38 years building a reputation for accuracy to be dishonest with you now about my own wife." Patricia was 71 years old. Her mother, Irene, had spent the last 4 years of her life financially dependent on Patricia's brother Gerald, who had managed her accounts after her diagnosis, and who had made her feel the precise weight and smallness of that dependency every single day. Not cruelly, not dramatically, but in the particular way of a person who knows they hold a ledger and wants the other person to know it too. Patricia had watched her mother reduced, in those 4 years, from a woman who owned her opinions to a woman who asked permission. She had watched it, and it had settled into her the way certain fears settle. Not on the surface where you can examine them, but underneath, where they drive decisions you don't fully audit. She had decided, somewhere in the 2 years after I retired, after I stopped going somewhere every morning, after the structure of my professional life dissolved, and what remained was just a man in a house, which is a different thing from a man in an office, that she needed an exit, not from our marriage, precisely from the version of the future she was afraid of. She had decided Daniel was that exit. She had moved money to him because she believed it was, in some accounting she had done privately, hers to move. She had told herself a story about it, in which the transfers were a form of planning, of prudence, of not becoming Irene. I understood that. I want you to hear that clearly. I understood exactly where it come from, and I could trace the logic of it from her mother's kitchen table all the way to ours. What I could not accommodate was the method. I had not made Patricia feel small. I had not managed her accounts or reduced her to asking permission for anything in 46 years. I had been, by every measure I could apply to myself, a present and reliable man. And the response to that, to 46 years of steady, unspectacular presence, had been to move $23,847 out of our shared life without a conversation, and then to tell me twice on a Wednesday morning that I couldn't prove a single thing. Quiet men are not empty men. Simple is not the same as absent, and being underestimated, in the end, is only a problem for the person doing the underestimating. Daniel called on the evening of Monday, March 28th, 5 days after Sandra Okafor's visit. He said he was sorry. He said it 4 times in the first 90 seconds. He said he had not known the amounts were that significant, that Patricia had told him the money was from her own savings account, that he had not thought to question it because she was his mother and he had trusted her the way children trust their parents. He said he would pay it back in full. He asked if I wanted to talk about it. I told him I appreciated the call. I told him I would need some time. I told him I expected the repayment to begin on the 1st of May in monthly installments of $412, and that I had worked out the schedule on a sheet of paper which I would mail to him. Then I said good night. He said he was sorry one more time. I said I heard him. Then I hung up. The written correspondence from the Hartford APS office arrived on Thursday, April 7th, exactly 14 business days after Sandra Okafor's visit, as she had said it would. The determination was a formal finding of financial exploitation under Connecticut statute. No criminal referral was recommended. That was not what I had asked for, and Gary had told me it was unlikely. What I had asked Gary for, in a separate conversation on March 15th, 8 days before Sandra Okafor knocked, was a notarized accounting of the full 17-month transfer history, compiled from the bank documentation, and Eleanor's witness record, prepared from my own permanent files. Gary had that document ready and delivered to my kitchen table by March 22nd, 1 day before my conversation with Patricia. I had signed it on March 22nd and placed it in the left drawer of my desk next to the green ledger and Eleanor's yellow pages, a formal record. clean, documented, signed, and permanent, so that no one at any point in whatever came next could tell me I was imagining things. It is September now, 6 months since the Wednesday morning in March. Patricia and I are still in a house on Sycamore Lane. We are seeing a counselor on Thursday afternoons, a woman named Dr. Lane Rourke, who has been doing marriage counseling in Hartford for 31 years and who, in my observation, does not flinch at anything and does not rush toward conclusions. Patricia goes. I'd go. We sit in the same room and we talk, which is more than we were doing the months before March. And I have come to believe that this is worth something, though I hold that belief carefully and do not place more weight on it than it can bear. Daniel has made every monthly installment. May 1st, June 1st, July 1st, August 1st, September 1st. Each one on time. For $112, as agreed, I record each one in the green ledger, because that is what the green ledger is for. I am not healed. I do not use that word, and I do not trust people who use it casually about things of this nature. What happened in the spring of 2021 changed the specific geometry of 46 years of marriage in ways that do not unchange, and I am 74 years old, and I have enough experience with permanent things to know the difference between something that repairs and something that simply continues on different terms. Patricia and I continue. That is the honest word for it. We continue. Eleanor Marsh came over on a Tuesday evening in August with a plate of shortbread cookies from her mother's recipe, a Scottish recipe. She told me that called for a particular ratio of butter to flour that she had never seen matched by any bakery in Connecticut. We sat on my porch on Sycamore Lane in the early evening light, and she did not bring up any of it. Not the yellow pages, not Sandra Okafor, not the gray sedan on the street. We talked about the summer, which had been a hot one, and her granddaughter Nora, who had just started her first year at UConn in stores, and the dogwood tree in my front yard that had finally bloomed in May after 3 years of threatening to and not following through. Eleanor said she had always known that dogwood would come around eventually. I said I had too. I thanked her at one point, without specifying what for. She said she had just been paying attention. I told her that was the most underrated practice in the world. She said Raymond had always said the same thing. We sat there until the light went, and then she went home, and I sat on the porch alone for another 20 minutes with the last of my coffee and the sound of Sycamore Lane in the early evening, which is a particular sound I have always liked. There is a particular kind of quiet that falls over a man when the long game is finished. It is not triumphant. I want to be precise about that, because triumphant is the wrong word, and the wrong word at this stage of my life is simply not acceptable. It does not feel like winning. It feels more like the closing of a file, the last form submitted, the last column totaled, the moment you push back from the desk and acknowledge that everything that needed to be documented has been documented. The record is accurate. The numbers are right. You came to do a thing and you did it. That is all. The rose bushes along the side fence bloomed in May, as they have bloomed every May since 1995. They will bloom again next May. Some things, if you have tended them correctly and asked nothing unreasonable of them, simply continue to do what they were always going to do. If you enjoyed this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of Quiet House Stories. I will see you on the next one.